Thank you very much for the organizers to invite and Ceylon to sponsor this session, physical meeting after a long time. My topic is management of neuroendocrine tumor, and I have used this ribbon, which is actual representation of neuroendocrine in terms of cancer ribbons, and it is called as zebra ribbons because each zebra is different in terms of the prints. And same way, the neuroendocrine tumor, each patient is an individual patient, which you have to consider as a individual person. And to follow a strict guidelines might be difficult to follow in case of neuroendocrine tumors. They behave differently, they present differently. So starting with the basics, its neuroendocrine classification has undergone a lot of evaluation in last 1 century. The latest um, accepted classification was UICC in 2017, in which it was classified as the neuroendocrine grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, then small cell and large cell, and poorly differentiated. So, what are the reasons? I work at AIG hospital, which is a gastro hospital. So, predominantly, I see a lot of gastric, or I should say, midgut, pancreatic, these type of neuroendocrine tumors. So, they could be foregut, midgut, or hindgut. Uh, to me, most common presentation is pancreatic cancers, where pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors with metastasis. And with based on the data, there is an increasing rate of diagnosis in last couple of decades. So in these two data, both at global level as well as the Indian level, shows that incidence of neuroendocrine tumor is 2 lakh per lakh population. It's a just a institutional bias, presentation bias. They present very frequently to my institute. So these are the percentage of different sites where the neuroendocrine tumor present. So more or less 15 in the lung, and 15 in the gastric, 15 pancreatic, then the midgut, jejunum, ileum, and appendix, and relatively lower in the rectum. So as I mentioned, most commonly what I see is pancreatic, second followed by jejunum or ileum, and then the stomach, and then the rectum. But all these gut neuroendocrine carcinoma is pretty common at my institute. So there is a peak of presentation and diagnosis, which is in the late 50s, 60s, which is observed in globally as well as in our institute also. And they present, majority of them present as either metastatic or locally advanced, which are not possible to resect completely. So this is the most common type of presentation. Minority of patient, being a gastro center, because of the lot of routine endoscopies and early presentation for gastric symptoms, we see a lot of resectable cases. But still, the most common presentation remains far by and large metastatic disease only. So the hormonal syndrome and neuroendocrine, not all neuroendocrine tumors are functional, but which are functional, this is the biochemical pathways by which they release the tumor markers which we send for neuroendocrine tumors, like the tryptophan is converted into 5-HIAA, and VMAs, which we, the 24-hour urinary metanephrines, which we calculate. So this is the pathway which is responsible for the tumor markers we evaluate. And somatostatin, which we somatostatin analog, which we use as a therapy, the first line therapy for neuroendocrine tumors, has multiple actions in the functioning. If these are the functional tumors, then the somatostatin cause reduction on these in the molecules. And since it has other markers, other off-site actions also, so that it may have some side effects also, like hyperglycemia. So what about the neuroendocrine receptor expression? So there are 4 or 5 types of neuroendocrine receptors, and the most commonly expressed is the type 2 one. So if you see in the functioning tumor, almost all functional neuroendocrine tumors have this receptor. And in non-functioning also, almost 90% have this SST2 receptor expression. So the basic treatment, the principles of syndrome management is, if it is functioning, reduce the hormone production, which will ultimately cause a symptom reduction. And also, if it is causing symptoms in terms of tumor growth, then we should get a tumor control also. Now, human somatostatin versus synthetic octapeptide analog, which we use clinically, octreotide. What is the difference is, because of the biochemical structural difference, the SST type 2 receptor affinity is higher with the analogous octreotide compared to human somatostatin. So then what is the difference between long acting and subcutaneous short acting? The long acting actually causes functional control much better. The flushing control is 84%, while in this it is half. And then the question comes, what about somatostatin analog resistant carcinoid syndromes? So usually around 6 to 18 months, each patients are different. There are a couple of mechanisms by which a tumor or patient become resistant to somatostatin analogs, like there is upregulation of SSTR receptors, and down regulation, which causes no binding sites, or there is a SSTR other subtypes, 1 to 5 different type of SSTR upregulates, and there is a autophosphorylation which cause automatic response of the receptor, or heterodimerization with SSTR with other receptors. So analogs of other receptors cause auto activation of SSTRs. Now, the clinical benefit above a standard dose of octreotide LAR. We all practice octreotide LAR for neuroendocrine, but some data is there. Can we increase it? So different authors have used from above supraoptimal dose of 60 mg to 160 mg. Recently, we could try 160 mg every 28 days in 2 of the patients who were not responding. Clinically stable. They were clinically stable, but progression was there. So we gave them an option, discussed the options, whether they want to go to second line treatment, or they want to try a supra normal dose of long acting LAR. And 2 of those patients got a stable disease at 3 months. So this is what our experience is. 62% of patient dose escalation. In this study, they had 62% of dose escalation, and in this study, 81% noted resolution of flushing and 80% resolution on diarrhea. So functional, whenever the problem is functional, we try to optimize the utilization of octreotide LAR, because that is the most effective therapy. In this patient, which I talked about, 2 of these patients in which I used 160 mg of octreotide LAR, the tumor reduction did not happen, but the symptoms got controlled. So when the predominantly symptoms are functional, not exactly tumor infiltration or tumor pain, then this is one of the treatment options which we can offer. So these are the different formulations. If you see that most common treatment response is stable disease. Minority of patients, that actually tumor size reduces. So very few patients develop partial response or CR. So in tumor growth may not be much, but functional control, excellent. So somatostatin analogs, there are few benefits like symptom relief as high as 60 to 80%, especially in the functioning pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. It is low toxicity, good long-term tolerability, once in 28 days injection. There are few limitations that if the tumor is high burden causing the symptoms, then it may not be an appropriate options to offer. It can go for tachyphylaxis and not producing the result. Since somatostatin can cause a paradoxical effect, it may worsen insulinomas in some cases. Then because of the hyperglycemia, it can cause few of the CHDs. And there is no value in offering SSAs in case of somatostatin receptor PET negative patients. So histopathologically, they are showing neuroendocrine deficient, but if you do DOTA PET, there is no uptake. Offering those patient octreotide may not be beneficial. So both of the guidelines suggest that if European guidelines or American-based NCCN guidelines, if carcinoid syndrome is there, then offer octreotide or lenalidomide. In these grade 1, grade 2, grade 1 is less than 10%, grade 2 less than 55%. Ki-67 chemotherapy is usually not effective, especially if they are carcinoid and functional tumors. There are case series which suggest that CAPTAM as a regimen up to 55% of Ki-67 can be offered, especially if they are non-functional or causing local symptoms of tumor infiltration. So in if you see different chemotherapies has been used, which routinely we are not offering these days, like streptozotocin, objective response rate was as low as 20%. So octreotide LAR remains the preferred first line therapy. While in the grade 3 neuroendocrine tumor, offering chemotherapy, the response rate CR remains negligible, but combination of partial response or stable disease becomes useful endpoint for different chemotherapy agent. Whichever treatment options we use, whether it is cisplatin etoposide, carboplatin etoposide, or combination of carbo, eto, vincristine, response rate is in the ranges of 30 to 40%. So what are the other targeted therapies? The first preferred is octreotide, lenalidomide. Increasing data is there for PRRT therapies like lutetium and yttrium. Fortunately, at my institute, both of these therapies are available. And in few of the cases, we could actually offer a dotatate therapy even prior to giving octreotide. So approved indication is progression on octreotide, PRRT is to be offered. But two of such patients who refused octreotide upfront, we could offer. And as a personal experience, both of them had zero response. So neither the activity reduced, neither the size reduced. But just two cases are not significant. So still, approved indication remains post octreotide progression. We can offer these therapies. Second line treatment options include everolimus, which work at mTOR level, and angiogenetic inhibitors like sunitinib, cabozantinib, lenvatinib, and bevacizumab. So the RADIANT 2 studied, which gave us few data, which gave us a randomized control trial as double-blind study, which studied advanced, means non-resectable, no curative surgery can be done, low or intermediate grade neuroendocrine tumor, so grade 1, grade 2, with radiological progression less than 12 months. So we have offered octreotide. What's next? So history of secretory symptoms are there. In this, continuing octreotide or everolimus plus octreotide, and with the endpoint of PFS. And what it offered is, there is actually benefit of adding octreotide plus everolimus, but most of the guidelines don't offer everolimus alone, because when analyzed at a statistical level, that becomes the hazard ratio was 0.9. So not less than 0.8, which we usually consider. But numerically speaking, everolimus plus octreotide is better than the placebo plus octreotide. So whatever subgroup we analyzed, performance status, gender, age group, primary tumor site, irrespective, small intestine or lung, colon, and others, everybody favored everolimus plus octreotide. But the ultimate hazard ratio was 0.9 statistical analysis. So as I mentioned, neuroendocrine tumors are heterogeneous. Lot of decision factors are there, like what is the tumor burden, proliferative index, is patient symptomatic or not, and what the patient wants. If with octreotide being one once in a 28 days cycle, it is pretty acceptable, but still if somebody wants to avoid injections, then other therapies can be offered. So this is my summary. Octreotide are established therapy in syndrome control and inhibition of tumor growth in low grade tumors, tumor growth to a certain extent only. Somatostatin analogs are first line anti-proliferative therapy in unknown growth behavior and slowly growing G1 or grade 1, grade 2 tumors of GI and especially pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. Watch and wait policy may be given for indolent, non-functioning, low tumor burden, nearly asymptomatic patients, and targeted therapy like everolimus, sunitinib, or PRRT may represent future treatment options in progressive disease on octreotide therapies. Thank you very much.